Want to teach your kids financial literacy, but not sure where to start? Greenlight can help. With Greenlight, parents can keep an eye on kids' spending and saving, while kids and teens use a card of their own to build money confidence. As a parent, you can send instant money transfers, set up chores, automate allowance, and more. It's a convenient way to run your household, customized to your family's needs, and the easy way to raise financially smart kids. Get started with Greenlight today and get your first month free at greenlight.com/Spotify.
Today on CityCast Houston, if you're frustrated with CenterPoint, wait until you learn about their exclusive fishing retreat where they woo elected officials. Plus, how one public servant caused many voters to lose trust in the election process in Harris County because he was quote-unquote a lazy employee. And Houston Mayor John Whitmire claims a foreign entity has a hand in local protests. I'll get into that and the rest of the week's news with Houston Public Media reporter Lucio Vasquez. It's Friday, August 16th. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Lucio, what's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing really good this morning. I really appreciate you guys having me. Recovering from a cold at the moment, so I might sound a little more deeper, kind of, really, really deep. But either way, I appreciate you guys having me.
No, the golden voice sounds fantastic. So there's a lot to talk about. And I want to jump right into it and point out that former Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner was picked by a majority of the precinct chairs to represent the Democratic Party on the ballot for the race for the 18th Congressional District. From a pool of 6 candidates, it came down to Mayor Turner and Amanda Edwards, and it was almost like an American Idol style picking process where they were given 3-minute speeches, but eventually Mayor Turner was the one picked to represent the Democratic Party on the ballot in November, and he will be facing off against Republican Ilana Santonze. So that is the big news there. And don't forget, there's also a special election to fill the remaining 2 months of the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee's seat for the 18th Congressional District. And her daughter, Erica Lee Carter, announced that she will run in that race. And there are going to be more people, I believe, joining the ballot for that special election. But just wanted to start with that and kind of lay everything out because that was some big news over the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really important context. And I think it's nice to see, former friends of Sheila Jackson Lee come out of the woodwork and actually try and fill the spot in the giant void that she left behind.
Absolutely. So let's get to our biggest story. And speaking of elections, there are a lot of twists and turns in this story, and you and I are going to spend some time on this one. The biggest story of the week is the tale of Darrell Blackburn. Now, who is he? Well, he's the former public servant and election administrator's office data analyst who was charged with 6 felony counts, 5 for tampering with government document and 1 for theft by a public official. By the way, that's punishable up to 20 years in prison. Now, we learned about Blackburn after District Attorney Kim Ogg announced the findings of a lengthy election fraud investigation stemming from the 2022 election. And you may remember that many voting locations had paper shortages temporarily. And this was the same election where 22 Republicans initially filed lawsuits to challenge the results of the election. And I know you covered this as well. What are your thoughts on this initially?
I mean, initially, I saw the press release and the press release saying criminal charges stemming from 2022 election fraud investigation. And I thought, oh my gosh, they had found, evidence of election fraud, right? No, it turns out that's not the case. So I was standing at that press conference, a little nervous, right? Because this could potentially be a really huge story. Not to dismiss it by any means, because it still is pretty big, right? I mean, these allegations potentially caused, or actually not even potentially, I think it's almost a fact. Like, people weren't unable to vote, or at least delayed in their vote because there weren't enough paper ballots. And apparently, allegedly, this man was the source of these issues.
Yeah, again, there was no fraud, no evidence of intentional interference in the election. And as Kim Ogg put it, it was quote unquote one lazy employee. And that was Blackburn, who, by the way, let's lay this out. He was working 2 jobs, all right? One as the election administrator's office data analyst, making over $90,000 a year, by the way. And then he was working another secret job in oil and gas where he earned $250,000 in the same time.
It's insane.
I know, it's so crazy, but wait, there is more. Blackburn also took paternity leave that was roughly estimated to cost Harris County about $21,000. I mean, what is happening here?
And I think they had also mentioned as well, like on election day itself, whenever we were, focused on all of these issues and the lack of paper ballots, among other things that weren't even related to these charges, apparently Blackburn had worked, at least according to his timesheets, more than 24 hours in a single day. So I think he worked like 18 hours with the Harris County Elections Administration Office, something like that. But basically, the timesheets just weren't adding up.
Yeah, that is the tale of Daryl Blackburn. And as Kim Ogg put it, she said, quote, Mr. Blackburn not only stole thousands of dollars from Harris County with timesheets and stuff like that, much more importantly, he stole individuals' right to vote. It's compounded by the loss of public trust, as you mentioned. And she went on to say, in our election system in Harris County, that is the real cost, and it is priceless.
Yeah, and so I do want to also emphasize again, this criminal investigation, found no evidence of voter fraud, but the impact to individual voters, how many people potentially didn't get a chance to cast their ballot that day, that's really not known at the moment. We can only assume, right? And so that impact, I think, is more being sorted out in civil court. There's a lot of lawsuits that were filed after the fact, and so those lawsuits are still playing out.
Also, let me lay out what exactly Blackburn did with the paper ballots, right? Like, this is a big question. Yeah, it turns out he just dropped off the same amount of paper to every polling site, meaning the busier ones were left with no paper for a while on election day because he just evenly dropped off the same amount. He's just like, okay, if we have 100 sheets of paper and there are 100 places, everybody gets one, right? Like, that's just the simple math he did. And that's not how it works because some polling sites are busier than others. And again, there was no evidence that he intentionally tried to skew the results. It just sounds like he was, you know what, I'm just going to get this done real quick and let me just make sure that everyone has some paper ballots and not take into account that some places are busier than others.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, he got a pretty penny after all of this. Apparently, he had worked both jobs for about 15 months or so. Wow. And I think it is also important to mention that, like, this is only the paper ballot issue, right? I mean, we had so many other issues that day. We had, in one location specifically, I think there were missing keys to voting machines. And so that location didn't open until, I think, like 4 hours after polls were supposed to open.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's just little things like that compounded, including the shortage of paper ballots that really led to a lot of disarray that day. I know myself, covering the election that day, I was stressed. There was so much going on, an insurmountable amount of issues. But again, no evidence of voter fraud.
Imprint is Houston's premier literary arts organization, and the 2024-2025 Imprint Margaret Brown Reading Series gets going this month, starting with Danez Smith's reading from their new collection, Bluff, on August 19th. On August 21st, Pulitzer Prize-winning author Richard Powers will read from his new book, Playground. And on November 18th, Ta-Nehisi Coates will be reading from his new book, The Message. Other authors in the season include Rumaan Alam, Jennifer Chang, Emma Donahue, Yuri Herrera, Rachel Kushner, Paul Lynch, Naomi Shihab Nye, and Danzy Senna. Plus, on April 14th, Katie Kitamura and Karen Russell will both be reading from their new books, Audition and The Antidote. General admission tickets are only $5 and free for students and seniors. Readings take place at the Alley Theater and other performing arts venues around town. Season subscriptions are also available. Learn more at inprint.org, inprint.org. Y'all already know that Houston's original neighborhood, downtown, is for everyone, and it's popping in August with Downtown Houston Plus's most popular events in Market Square Park and Trebley Park, like Blanket Bingo, Movies Under the Stars. You also have the Summer Trivia Series that will tease your brain, and how about Beats and Flow Yoga, which will bring you bliss. Come out to enjoy these nighttime events in their parks and enjoy cool treats from their Market Square Park farmers market vendors and Toot Suite in Trebley Park. Downtown is the place to be. In fact, more people visited downtown Houston last year than the entire population of Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, and San Antonio combined. There's no better time to live downtown than now. From starter apartments to luxury lofts, everyone can take advantage of the arts, business, culture, entertainment, food, and recreation. Learn more about these great events at downtownhouston.org. Downtown Houston, get energized and revived. All right, Lucio, let's get to our most overlooked stories. You start this one off. What do you got for us?
So, this one's a bit of a longer story, but I'm trying to summarize it. Basically, Mayor John Whitmire proposed an ordinance to ban protests within, I believe, 200 feet of a targeted residence after pro-Palestinian demonstrators kind of repeatedly protested at his home. Whitmire has claimed that some of these protesters have been paid by Iran, citing intelligence reports, although it's a little iffy as to where these reports even come from. I mean, there's a lot of questions up in the air, and some of the council members have also pushed back against the ordinance as well. So as of now, the vote on this ordinance has been pushed back to, I believe it was referred to a public safety committee to further review as opposed to being voted on. And that's kind of where we sit right now.
Yeah, that one, when I heard about it and Mayor Whitmire was getting pushback, right, from council members like, okay, we can't do this. There are going to be First Amendment issues stemming from this, although Dallas has a similar ordinance in place. And, Mayor Whitmire keeps bringing that one up. But when he referenced that there was outside influence from a foreign government, with these pro-Palestine protests, that to me was like okay, you really have nothing here. And who knows, there might be, but you can't say something like that and not give us more information, right? I know he said it was, quote, advice from Homeland Security, other departments, some higher than city government. But come on, like, you can't just throw that out there, right? That's not a fair thing to do.
It's a pretty hefty claim. And, it's a claim that's not really being received well by advocates in that realm. As is being quoted as a tired trope of painting folks from the Middle East and from South Asia as terrorists. That's an advocate who spoke to one of our reporters at Houston Public Media after the story came out. It's just, it is a weird claim. And I mean, again, not to say one way or the other, right? I would love to see these intelligence reports if possible. But as of right now, we just have to go off of Whitmire's word and whether or not we want to, feed into that rhetoric, I suppose.
Yeah, and when pressed for more details, according to Houston Public Media, your colleague, Dominic Anthony Walsh, had this quote in his story from a spokesperson for the mayor that the city of Houston, Homeland Security, and others briefed the mayor on this. Whitmire was informed that some protesters are professional and getting paid, but he has not personally made that claim about all the protesters. But you kind of did, right, by throwing that out there.
I'm very curious to see what happens during these committee meetings and how the discussion evolves after this week. Because, again, not to sound like a broken record, but it's a hefty claim. And it's a claim that, even though they did slightly back it up with, we heard it from Homeland Security and we've been briefed on, et cetera, et cetera. I would love to know the percentage of these protesters who are, allegedly professional and getting paid, right? I mean, there's so many questions now, more questions than answers.
Yeah. Okay, so what is next for this? Other council members voiced support for this decision to refer the item to committee. So that is where it's going to go next. And the ordinance could be revised. And Mayor Whitmire, by the way, was okay with that. He's like, look, okay, revise it, but let's at least talk about this. And that's the next steps for this ordinance. Okay, let's get to my most overlooked story of the week. And my jaw just dropped when I started reading the Houston Chronicle's investigation into what lawmakers and lobbyists call the pond. And brace yourself, if you're angry with CenterPoint about their handling of Hurricane Beryl, you probably will get even more upset learning about this. So apparently the energy company has a private retreat where they take state lawmakers and it's down a private road and has some of the best fishing on the Trinity Bay. Basically, CenterPoint uses it as a place to lobby and court lawmakers while everyone enjoys nature and some fishing. The Houston Chronicle found more than 70 current or former state and local elected officials who visited the hidden getaway. Now get this, it has a kitchen that serves 3 meals a day, an open bar, a pool, a poker table, and there's staff to help folks reel in their catch of the day, clean it, and fillet it to take home. Now, that is something I kind of want to do because that is some great service. And here's the thing, CenterPoint calls the pond part of its quote-unquote legislative advocacy and says it's a conference center in its records. But this retreat is not open to the public. And of course, it's all paid by you, the ratepayers. So shout out to the Houston Chronicle for opening up this investigation and getting these details out there. The pond. What are your thoughts on this, Lucio?
I know this is an audio format, but I'm kind of speechless. Have you ever heard of Bohemian Grove?
Mm-mm.
It's like, it's a kind of a similar vibe with like, quote unquote, the most prominent men in the world. And it's been around for like decades and decades and decades. And, former politicians and presidents and whatnot have come to this, event. And it's given me the same kind of vibe, which is, I don't want to explicitly say cult, but
the CenterPoint cult. I mean, this is where you meet up, and
it's just I don't know. It's a very interesting. I don't know. It's a very, because my thing as a journalist, right, is you're creating this echo chamber, and you're limiting access as well. And these are where potentially important conversations are being had between people of power, right? And so it kind of makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up just ever so slightly.
Okay, CenterPoint is a huge billion-dollar corporation. We know that. And we know they have some lobbyists, right? And we know that they're going to have influence over decision makers and lawmakers. But to actually see it and how they're doing it, especially right now after Hurricane Beryl, when their approval rating is, near zero, it seems like, it's just frustrating and it is maddening, right? I can't even imagine what other listeners are thinking right now when they hear a story like this and you hear about just what is being done to lobby these state lawmakers and local lawmakers as well, and local politicians, right? It's frustrating, but that's part of the game, unfortunately. Like, it's happening with all these corporations.
Oh, absolutely. And I am curious as well, there has been a lot more talk of accountability for CenterPoint after Hurricane Beryl. What would this, event, get together look like after you potentially alienate and anger some of these politicians to the point of, actively, publicly saying that, we need to restrict.
Good point.
I think it was Governor Greg Abbott, I believe, he discussed, the potential of restricting their region, basically the region in which they control power over.
Yeah.
So, these are discussions that I don't think we've really seen before when it comes to CenterPoint. And I'm very interested to see how these discussions evolve over the next few years, especially during, the next legislative session, right?
Yeah, and that was that press conference right after Hurricane Beryl where Governor Abbott basically said, is this too much for one company to have this much responsibility over one part of the region? So, yeah, and I wonder how many politicians are going to reject an invite now to the pond, because it seems like it's one of those places that you want to go to, right? It seems like it's great. The service sounds fantastic. They're going to fillet your fish for you, clean it up, bag it up, so you just go home and cook it if that's what you want to do. I wonder how many are going to reject this, because as more investigations are done, we'll find out the names, too, of which politicians were out there and which continue to go with CenterPoint.
Yeah, I would assume so. Again, the spotlight is on CenterPoint, I think, now more than it has been, especially in the last few years. So, I'm going to sound like a broken record. I'm very optimistic to see what the reporting looks like moving forward.
Yep. One final thought, will lawmakers hold them accountable when they get courted and treated this way with food, drink, and fishing? And again, this happens with a lot of big industry, but it's a question now that I know a lot of people are going to be asking.
Yeah, I mean, optimistically speaking, right, as a fellow voter, right, I would hope that those in power would remain unbiased and unswayed by, gifts and whatnot, right? These are the people we elect for a reason, right? Plus, how good could the fish be, right? I don't know. Like, please, he's got to be like, from Costco. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just please, don't be swayed.
Please don't be swayed over some redfish.
Yes.
Reporting live from under my blanket, I'm Susan Curtis with Dunkin' at Home. Breaking news, pumpkin spice iced and hot coffees are back. I'll pass it to Mr. Curtis with his blanket for the full story.
That is so right, Susan. It's never too early to get in a spicy mood. I'm talking cinnamony goodness that's so tasty, people don't want to leave their blankets either. Back to you.
No, back to you.
All you.
The home with Dunkin' Pumpkin Spice is where you want to be.
Hey, Lucio, let's get to our moment of joy. It's Friday. We're feeling good. What made you happy this week?
So my moment of joy is a personal one. I'm a 26-year-old person right now. Majority of my life I spent as an only child. My father remarried a few years back, and I now have a little sister and a little brother. And this week I had the pleasure of seeing my little sister go to kindergarten.
Oh.
And I've never had an experience like that before in my entire life. And I wasn't necessarily around other kids growing up. And so, gosh, it just, it's something that I don't even know how to describe. I would imagine that a lot of parents and people who know kids are feeling this week and these next few weeks as school starts. And it just fills my heart with joy, just to see that little girl run around all crazy like in kindergarten.
Oh, that is so beautiful. It's a feeling of joy, of anxiety, of hope. And it's such a cool feeling to see that kindergartner go out and be her own person. I did that with my oldest daughter when we dropped her off to kindergarten, although it was a little different because the first half of kindergarten was done online. This was during the COVID lockdowns, right? And school kind of started. But then the second half of the school year, we dropped her off to in-person learning. And it's such an uneasy feeling, but it's such a memorable feeling of hope and joy because you get to see them develop as their own little person. And every school year, you're going to do this next year with first, second, third, fourth, and so on and so on. And that feeling never goes away and that joy never goes away. She's going to do great.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, that is awesome. I'm so happy to hear that. And this brings me to my moment of joy. We're going to talk about some toddlers here as well. And please stick with me here because this week, the video of two toddlers walking on the East Freeway after a crash was all over social media. And my heart absolutely sank when I saw it. But my moment of joy is that the two toddlers were not seriously hurt after they were ejected from their dad's Jeep during a collision on the East Freeway. Now, the video of the aftermath shows two children wearing only diapers sitting in the middle of the freeway and their father and another man running to them to make sure they're okay. They get up, they are confused, they're lost. And it just broke my heart. Like these toddlers had to go through that. But again, the fact that they survived this was my moment of joy. And I want to nail this message home. Parents, guardians, anybody traveling with any kids, and frankly, anybody in your car, please buckle up no matter how far you're going or how safe you feel. This could have ended a lot worse, Lucio, but somehow, some way, the 1-year-old and 4-year-old were protected and they survived. So once again, please buckle up. This is something I remind my wife all the time. I remind all of my family that even if you're going down the street, please buckle up. You just never know.
Yeah, no, I mean, speaking from personal experience, as a little kid, I was hesitant, maybe rebellious whenever buckling up. I was a kid. And I remember one day, got into a little fender bender. My head just kind of smacked the back of the headrest, my dad's headrest who was driving. And thankfully, no one was injured. But it scared me enough to realize, potentially I could die.
Yeah.
And so, yes, going to reiterate what you said. Absolutely. Buckle up, please.
Please buckle up. And I'm so happy those two sweet little angels are okay. And my heart just sank when I saw that one. All right, that's going to do it for today. That was a lot of fun. Lucio, thank you so much for joining us and hope to have you back on pretty soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
That was Lucio Vasquez. You can check out all of his reporting on News 88.7 and on HoustonPublicMedia.org. As we wrap up the week, I'm going to ask you for a favor. Please share this episode with 3 friends who want to connect more to our city. And be sure to subscribe to Hey Houston, our daily newsletter that's filled with news, events, and happenings around the city. And while you're at it, please give us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. That will do it for this week here on CityCast Houston. Our producers are Carleon Jones, Francisco Kilgore, and Joyce Tang. Our newsletter editor is Brooke Lewis. Our executive producer is Laura Isensee. And I'm your host, Raheel Ramzanali. Our music is by the band All the Kimonos. We'll be back on Monday to discuss if Houston homeowners are about to face an insurance crisis with all of the extreme weather we've been facing. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new. Okay, I'm going to get to my most overlooked story of the week and my jaw. That's what I'm trying to say. Wow. I am a mess.
It's okay.